When designing your own training program or looking at a potential training program to follow, a very typical question is, what type of exercises should you be looking at? Should it contain? Should you be looking at a program that favors big multi-joint compound lifts, or one that favors more single joint, more specific isolation movements? Let's have a quick look to help you decide. Compound movements, also known as multi-joint movements, are effective and efficient, and include your staple exercises, your barbell squat, your deadlift, your bench press, and your rows. Now, there is no question, it is clear that compound movements found in most strength programs build mass, improve body composition, and increase overall strength. The thing is, compound movements create more central fatigue within a single session. What this means is your brain triggers task or execution failure that ends your set rather than the muscle fibers actually reaching true contractile failure and that ending your set. As an example, let's look at barbell squats. For most of us, our fatigue in muscle firing coordination and muscle stability will cause you to have to stop before the actual targeted muscles themselves reach true contractile failure. This in turn lowers the amount of total stress that you can apply to the targeted muscle groups. What's this mean for muscle growth? It means that you might not be able to exhaust certain muscle fibers in your training session just using compound movements. Okay, so isolation movements, known as single joint movements where only one joint is in play and only one muscle group is in play. These movements include dumbbell flies, bicep curls, tricep extensions, dumbbell pullovers, to name a few. Now, single joint isolation movements, well, they create less central nervous system fatigue than a compound movement does, meaning you can get more muscle activation and more fibers involved, and more peripheral fatigue for each set for a given targeted muscle. You can take these movements so much closer to true contractile failure in a safer manner. Okay, so what's the downside? Isolation movements only work one muscle group at a time, making them less effective from a time perspective. As well, now while you can reach true muscular contraction failure with an isolation exercise as opposed to a big compound movement, the loads that you are lifting are substantially less than what you can lift with a big compound movement, meaning the less load-induced mechanical tension, well, not as much as present. So, where does this leave us? Which should we favor, compound or isolation? Now, before we make this call, let's take a closer look at what is required to achieve maximal muscle growth from an exercise selection viewpoint. Understand, everyone has a unique and different anatomy structure. Our current muscular development and individual biomechanics all should contribute to which exercises we actually select and are prescribed in our training programs. A universal one-size-fits-all program doesn't work. Next is managing fatigue. Exercise selection over the course of your week must take into account fatigue rates and recovery considerations. Some exercises are far more fatiguing on your central nervous system than others. This needs to be taken into account so you can optimize training volume for the targeted muscle group without overreaching and eventually leading to overtraining. And finally, if you can't hit it, you can't grow it. Different exercises, even for the same muscle group, inflict different levels of tension at different points of that particular muscle's contractile range. For you to stimulate full muscle growth potential, you need to hit all points of that muscle's range. Let's take your quads as an example. Barbell squats will place the greatest tension at the muscle's lengthened to mid-range contraction range. Leg extensions, well, they'll inflict the greatest load when the quad is fully shortened. And the sissy squats places the greatest tension on the quads when they are forced out of their lengthened position. So as you can see with just one example, a combination of both compound and isolation exercises are required to hit the quads full contraction profile. This means that the ideal muscle building or physique changing way would be to use a combination of compound and isolation movements. A balanced program that uses both is what's key to changing your physique and triggering lean muscle growth in the most efficient manner possible.